Welcome back to English Through Wisdom. I hope you learned something valuable from our last lesson. It is wonderful to have you here again today.
I was 41 years old, standing in an elevator on the 40th floor of a building I helped build, and I could not remember the last time I felt anything except tired. My name doesn't matter yet. What matters is that I had everything a person is supposed to want: a corner office, a wife who used to laugh more, a calendar so full there was no room left for the one thing I never scheduled: peace. Every night I closed my eyes and saw the same face. Every morning I made decisions based on something that happened 7 years earlier, something that was already over, something that could not touch me anymore, and yet somehow touched everything. I thought I was being careful. I was actually a prisoner. Years later, I finally understood the wisdom hidden behind that one strange afternoon with a stranger in gray robes who asked me a question I still cannot forget. Welcome to English Through Wisdom. Here we learn English through powerful stories, timeless lessons, and wisdom gathered from cultures around the world. Today's story is about a man who thought remembering pain was keeping him safe, and the quiet monk who showed him it was doing the opposite. The story. His name was Daniel Voss, and by every visible measure, he had won. At 28, he had nothing but a laptop and a stubborn belief that he could build something real. By 35, he had a company with 200 employees, and his photograph on the cover of a business magazine, under a headline that called him the architect who never sleeps. By 41, he had a house with too many empty rooms, a marriage that had gone quiet the way a radio goes quiet when nobody bothers to turn it back on, and a habit of checking his phone at 3 in the morning as if the past might finally send him an apology. The betrayal had happened 7 years earlier. His closest business partner, a man named Marcus, who had been his roommate in college, who had stood beside him at his wedding, had taken confidential plans to a competitor and walked away with a settlement that left Daniel humiliated in front of investors he had spent a decade earning. Daniel had rebuilt everything from the ashes of that year. He was proud of that. What he did not notice was that he had rebuilt his entire life as a fortress, and the walls never came down again. He no longer signed contracts without 3 lawyers reading them twice. He no longer trusted a new hire until they had proven themselves for at least a year, sometimes longer. He no longer told his wife, Elena, the full truth about how frightened he still was, because admitting fear felt like handing someone else the knife. "You work like someone is still chasing you," Elena said one evening, watching him read emails at the dinner table for the 3rd night in a row. "Someone is," Daniel said, only half joking. "Marcus is in another country, Daniel. He hasn't called in years." "He doesn't need to call. I remember for both of us." She didn't answer that. She simply picked up her plate and carried it to the sink, and the silence between them said more than any argument could have. That autumn, Daniel's doctor sent him on a mandatory leave after his blood pressure numbers frightened even him. His assistant booked a retreat in the hills, a quiet property built around an old monastery that had been taking in stressed executives for extra income long before anyone called it wellness tourism. Daniel packed one bag and told himself he would check his email twice a day. No more. He broke that promise within 6 hours of arriving. It was on the second morning, while he sat alone on a stone bench scrolling through messages he had promised himself he would not read, that a monk approached and sat down beside him without asking permission. The man was older, maybe 60, with hands that looked like they had done real work, and eyes that looked like they had stopped being surprised by people a long time ago. "You're somewhere else," the monk said. It wasn't a question. "I'm right here," Daniel said, not looking up. "Your body is here. I asked about you." Daniel finally looked at him. Something about the directness of the man's voice made it impossible to give the usual polite deflection. "I'm thinking about something that happened a long time ago," he admitted. "How long ago?" 7 years. The monk nodded slowly, as if this answer confirmed something he already suspected. "How heavy is yesterday?" he asked. Daniel almost laughed at the strangeness of the question. "Yesterday weighs nothing," he said. "It's not even real anymore. It's just a memory." The monk smiled, the kind of smile that has no smugness in it at all. "Then why are you still carrying it?" Daniel opened his mouth to argue, and found, for the first time in years, that he had no answer ready. The monk stood, brushed off his robe, and said only, "Come back here tomorrow morning. Bring nothing. I will bring everything you need." Daniel almost didn't go. He told himself the whole conversation had been a strange, slightly manipulative piece of retreat theater designed to make wealthy guests feel spiritual for an afternoon. But at 6 the next morning, unable to sleep anyway, he found himself back on the same stone bench. The monk was waiting with a canvas backpack at his feet. It looked heavy before anyone lifted it. "Put this on," the monk said. "Wear it all day. Do not take it off until I tell you." Daniel lifted the pack and felt his shoulders drop under the weight immediately. "What's in it?" "Stones," the monk said simply. "Now walk with me." They walked the mountain paths for hours. At first, Daniel focused on the questions rather than the weight, curious what strange lesson was coming. But as the morning stretched into noon, the questions faded, and only the weight remained. His shoulders burned. His lower back ached in a way that reminded him he was not 25 anymore. Sweat soaked through his shirt, even in the cool mountain air. Around noon, they passed a waterfall that visiting guests usually stopped to photograph. Daniel barely glanced at it. By 2 in the afternoon, a family of deer crossed the path 30 feet ahead of them, and Daniel noticed them only because the monk stopped walking, not because he had seen them himself. "You didn't see the deer," the monk said. "I was thinking about the weight." "You are always thinking about the weight," the monk said. "That is the first thing I wanted you to notice." By sunset, Daniel's legs shook with every step. The straps had cut red lines into his shoulders. He had not eaten since breakfast, had not laughed once, had barely spoken except to complain quietly about the pain in his back. The monk finally stopped them at the same stone bench where the whole strange day had begun. He sat down and gestured for Daniel to do the same. "Why didn't you put it down?" the monk asked. Daniel stared at him, genuinely confused by the question. "You told me to wear it all day. I told you to wear it. I never told you not to rest. I never told you not to set it down for even a moment when the weight became too much. You carried it because you assumed you had to, not because I demanded it every single second." Daniel felt something shift in his chest, small but unmistakable, like a door easing open a few inches. The monk continued, his voice quiet now. "No one told you to carry your old pain this long either, Daniel." The use of his actual name, which Daniel did not remember giving him, landed harder than the sentence itself. He sat in silence, the backpack still on his shoulders, the ache in his body suddenly feeling like the exact shape of the ache he had been carrying inside for 7 years without ever naming it. Pain has an expiration date, the monk said. The event ends. The suffering only continues because we keep replaying it, keep rehearsing the argument we never got to finish, keep imagining the apology that never came. Your mind mistakes familiar pain for protection. It tells you that remembering keeps you safe, but look at what it actually did. It built you a fortress and then trapped you inside it with the person who hurt you, even though he left 7 years ago and never has to live in that fortress at all. Only you do. So what am I supposed to do? Pretend it didn't happen? No, the monk said. You visit the memory when it serves you, when it teaches you, when it protects you from an actual present danger. But you do not live there. The past is a place to visit, not a place to live. He reached over and unbuckled the top strap of the backpack himself. Take one stone out, he said. Just one. Tell me what it represents. Daniel reached into the bag with shaking hands and pulled out a smooth gray stone, surprisingly heavy for its size. He turned it over once. Betrayal, he said quietly. Marcus, set it down, not thrown. Set it down gently, like something that mattered once and doesn't need to be carried anymore. Daniel placed the stone on the ground beside the bench. Another, the monk said. Daniel reached in again. This one felt different in his palm, sharper somehow. Shame, he said, for not seeing it coming, for trusting the wrong person and thinking that made me weak. Trusting someone who later hurt you was never weakness, the monk said. It was evidence that you were capable of trust at all. Set it down. One by one, Daniel emptied the bag. Regret for the years he had spent guarding himself instead of living. Anger at a version of Marcus who existed only in his memory now, since the real Marcus had likely moved on entirely. Fear that trusting Elena fully would mean risking the same wound twice. Each stone had a name once he was forced to say it out loud, and each name, once spoken, seemed to lose some of its grip on him. When the bag was finally empty, Daniel stood up without meaning to, the way a person stands when their body suddenly remembers what lightness feels like. He rolled his shoulders. He took a breath that went all the way down, deeper than any breath he could remember taking in years. And then he noticed the birds. They had been there the entire day, he realized, singing somewhere above the trail the whole time, and he had not heard a single note of it until this exact moment. He noticed the last orange light spreading low across the valley. He noticed, absurdly, that his hands did not hurt anymore, even though nothing about his hands had actually changed. Nothing outside changed today, the monk said, watching him. Only what you were willing to keep carrying. Daniel looked down at the small pile of stones scattered on the ground beside the bench, ordinary rocks that had felt, for one entire day, like the heaviest things in the world. What do I do with them now? He asked. Leave them, the monk said. They already taught you everything they came to teach. The monk stood, adjusted his robe, and began walking back toward the monastery without another word, leaving Daniel alone on the bench in the fading light, empty-handed for the first time in 7 years. and somehow, impossibly, feeling full. The wisdom behind the story. The image at the heart of this story, carrying a burden long after the moment that created it has passed, comes from a well-known Zen Buddhist teaching story, sometimes called The Tale of the Two Monks and the River. In the traditional version, an older monk carries a woman across a muddy river to help her, then sets her down and continues walking. Hours later, his younger companion, still troubled, asks why the older monk broke their vow against touching women. The older monk replies, "I set her down at the riverbank. Why are you still carrying her? I should be honest with you about this story's history." Like many oral teaching tales passed down through Zen tradition, it does not have a single confirmed author or original date, and different versions exist across different Buddhist lineages. What we can say with confidence is that it reflects a genuinely old and widely taught principle within Zen practice, that suffering often continues not because of the original event, but because the mind keeps carrying it long after the moment has ended. This idea also echoes a phrase often shared in modern mindfulness teaching. Pain is inevitable, suffering is optional, a concept closely associated with Buddhist philosophy more broadly. Though again, exact original attribution varies by source, and I cannot confirm a single verified origin for that specific English phrasing. What both ideas share is the same core truth our story explored through Daniel and the Backpack of Stones. The event itself, the betrayal, the failure, the heartbreak, ends the moment it happens. What continues afterward is a choice, often an unconscious one, to keep reliving it. Every time we replay an old wound in our mind, we add another stone to a bag we never had to keep wearing. This is why the wisdom survived for centuries, retold in monasteries, in family stories, in quiet conversations between people who have lived long enough to lose something and slowly learn how to set it down. It survives because every generation rediscovers the same trap for itself and needs, in its own time, the same simple reminder. Life lesson reflection. Daniel didn't fail because he felt pain. Pain is not the enemy in this story. The enemy was the quiet, almost invisible decision he made every single day to keep reliving something that had already ended, believing it was protecting him when it was actually the thing standing between him and his own life. Most of us are carrying something right now. Maybe it's not a betrayal from a business partner. Maybe it's a comment someone made about you in school that you still hear in your own voice. Maybe it's a relationship that ended badly, and some part of you still keeps score. Maybe it's a mistake you made once, years ago, that you have never once let yourself off the hook for. Here are a few questions worth sitting with, the way Daniel had to sit with his. Have you ever avoided a good opportunity because of one bad experience that has nothing to do with the new situation in front of you? Have you ever kept someone at a distance, not because of who they actually are, but because of who someone else once was? If you truly believe yesterday weighs nothing, as Daniel first said without thinking, then why does it still seem to control so many of your decisions today? You don't have to answer these out loud, but I'd genuinely like to know, in the comments below, what stone you might be ready to finally set down. Sometimes simply naming it, the way Daniel had to name betrayal, shame, and regret out loud, is the first step in learning how to carry it no further. Repeat this short passage aloud after listening. Focus on rhythm, natural pausing, and emotional tone, not just pronunciation. "Nothing outside changed today," the monk said, watching him. "Only what you were willing to keep carrying." Daniel looked down at the small pile of stones scattered on the ground beside the bench. Ordinary rocks that had felt, for one entire day, like the heaviest things in the world. "What do I do with them now?" he asked. "Leave them," the monk said. "They already taught you everything they came to teach." Final message. Daniel carried stones for one day and finally understood a weight he had been carrying for 7 years. The wisdom is simple, even if living it never quite is. The past is a place to visit, not a place to live. Today you also practiced real, natural English through emotion, dialogue, and story, the way language actually sticks. Keep learning English, keep discovering stories, and keep collecting wisdom from around the world.
If you enjoyed learning English through this ancient saying, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video with someone who might need this wisdom today. Until next time, keep learning English and keep collecting wisdom from around the world.